Hello, my name is Gloria Gutierrez. I am the president of the League of Women Voters of the Torrance area. And our area includes actually Torrance, Carson, Gardena, Harbor City, Lomita. We were founded over 100 years ago, 6 months before women got the right to vote through suffrage. And our own Torrance charter is just celebrating its 60th anniversary, which is really exciting. So the League began as a mighty political experiment designed to help the 20 million new voters, women voters, to carry out their new responsibilities. It encouraged them to participate in shaping public policy. We were then and continue to be a nonpartisan organization, which means that we don't support or oppose candidates or political parties at any level of government. We believe that this nonpartisan stance helps us stay out of the party politics of the day. And that was then, and it is now. However, we do encourage our members to be political by educating citizens about and lobbying for government and social reform legislation. So we continue working to protect and expand voting rights and ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. We empower voters and defend democracy through our advocacy efforts, through education and litigation, at the local level, like here in Torrance, at the county level, Los Angeles, at state, California, and all the other states, and national levels. So in addition to tonight's event, we have another one later this month, which is called Grappling with Racism, Bias, and Discrimination in the South Bay. We'll be hosting retired Principal Sydney Morrison at Toyota Meeting Hall on Thursday, February 23rd at 7 p.m. We'd love to see you there in person. And perhaps even to come join our local league or your local league if you want, if you like what we're doing and either want to support our mission or get involved. At the end, I'll be sharing a feedback survey so you can share your interest and as well as provide feedback about the event. I would like to now introduce our Social Policy Director, Dr. Sharon Alexander, who will introduce our speaker for the night. Dr. Alexander hosts a transportation posse to talk all things transportation in the South Bay, which is open to anyone who's interested.
Hi, I want to introduce myself. I'm the Social Policy Director. I'm Sharon Alexander, and I have a long history as a sort of community activist and networker. I discovered the power of the League of Women Voters in helping to shape public policy. And that seems to be a big secret. We don't just register voters, we're actually activists. And after I discovered that the state actually comes to the League and says, what are your 3 big issues this year? After that, you couldn't hold me back from joining the local league. And I invite everybody to join us, and men are invited to join as well as women. So tonight, we're going to talk about traffic and a transportation future possibility. Torrance was a planned residential community. It was primarily designed on a grid, and yet it was planned around cars without much regard for the increasingly dense traffic it now carries. Major thoroughfares are difficult for bicycles and pedestrians to cross, and there's no metro here to carry residents to downtown LA or the airport. And now with climate change becoming a critical issue as well, planners are thinking about mitigations. I'd like to introduce you to Grace Peng, PhD, extraordinaire. She's a data engineer and scientist, but also a scholar and a community leader who's passionate about defending democracy. She's the Natural Resources Chair for the League of Women Voters of Los Angeles County. She's also the League of Women Voters California Energy Team Leader and is on the Water Board as well. She's a weather and climate analyst, a whiz at data crunching, and she's a pro at giving talks about traffic and transportation futures. Grace?
I hope I'm unmuted. But did you want me to talk about my league origin story first? A little bit about who I am?
Yes, please.
So I am an immigrant from Taiwan, which did not have free and open elections when my family left. I was a small child when I came here, and I had never heard of League, and my mother had never heard of League. And when I was a freshman at Berkeley, my very first election in 1984, everyone wanted my vote, and I didn't have any political leanings yet. I didn't know. But League dropped off brochures in the mailroom at my dorm, and they were the only people who gave me unbiased facts. And they told me the gory truth in complexity and let me make up my own mind. And so ever since then, before voting, I've always checked to look at what League information there was about the issues I was voting for. And then I had a friend, and it never occurred to me that someone had to write that. And I thought it was I thought it was prose. But my friend, one time I was trying to get together with a close friend, and she just was like booked every single night, it seemed like. And I asked her, how do I get to see you? And she said, it's election season. I have League of Women Voters things several nights a week. So if you want to see me, then let's carpool together to the meeting. And she had an ulterior motive, because not only did we have dinner and carpool, but I ended up having assignments on initiatives to research and write up. And ever since then, I've been not just someone who looks up their website to look up election information, and someone who occasionally sends a check when I remember, but I became a dedicated volunteer, because democracy does not defend itself. The electorate does not educate itself. It needs some guidance, and it needs some non-commercial guidance. We're volunteers. We're not paid to espouse a particular view. We are people that look at the evidence, and we look at the data from around the world, and then we do advocate for things that we know that we're pretty certain will have better outcomes in the end. And that's, as with my work in weather and climate, I realized I never thought that I would have to deal with so much disinformation. I thought that scientists would just tell the politicians, this is what we need to do, and then they would do it, and then we would be saved. But 30 years of disinformation, it's very disheartening. Our planet, our CO2 is quite a bit higher than when I started agitating for better bicycle infrastructure, because even 30 years ago, we knew that it was cars. For the US, it was mostly cars that's driving our emissions. And so I've been doing this work, trying to make the streets safer, for climate, which is what I studied, and then also as a mother of a child that I love my mother, I love my child. I don't want either of them to get run over at intersections, and it is scary to send your loved ones out there on the streets. So that's what brought me to this work. And with that, I am going to start. You should have stopped me so that I could start my slideshow.
Go ahead, start your slideshow.
Can you see my slideshow now? Oops.
Yes, we can.
We see our beloved Hawthorne Boulevard. And I wanted to show you a very pretty photo of a new eco-district, rendering of a eco-district in Germany. And Sharon says, no, we gotta start people with where we are now, to show that, like, if we don't just traffic and climate are very similar in that if you choose not to act, it's only going to get worse. Like if we model everything to cars, then car traffic is just going to increase and increase, and then we get to a geometric problem. Because remember, about when Torrance was laid out, you had one car per family, and now you have more than one car per licensed driver. You have one of the highest car ownership rates in the whole country, which is remarkable. That's why everybody's like parking. Like, where will we park our cars? We can't build any more housing because where will we park? And it's because we have made our streets so car-centric that it's become like this. So doing nothing and going on our present path is only going to make it worse. So doing nothing, deciding to do nothing and continuing the status quo is making a decision. It's making a decision to keep adding CO2 emissions. It's making a decision to keep killing people on the streets, what we call traffic deaths, traffic violence. And it's a decision to impoverish ourselves because it costs like $10,000 a year to own a car. And so in science, we like to go back and think about first principles, like what do we know? I mean, and what does it mean? And so what is transportation? It's just the main purpose is to connect people to destinations that they value. And that would mean getting a child to school, going to work if you like your job, but going to work if you like having a paycheck too. But people want to go visit their friends. They want to go to restaurants. They want to be social. They want to go visit the arts. It's not just about surviving. It's about thriving. And there have been many times when I wanted to do something and then I thought about the traffic and I said, oh, no, I think I'm going to stay home. Well, that's not thriving. I am not reaching a destination that I value. And so transportation is about moving people. It's not about moving cars. It's about moving people so we could do more, right? First principles, ab initio. And so that means that bicycles are not just toys. This is transportation. This is the Netherlands. And this is just a family going somewhere on a weekend day. And look at people of all ages riding a bicycle to go somewhere, which is transportation. This is transportation. This is the Portland bike bus with Coach Balto. He's a PE teacher that started a bike bus, and now he has 150 kids riding a bike bus on a fixed route to the elementary school where he's a PE teacher. And there are bike buses starting all over the country. They started in Barcelona, and it's now an international movement to get kids to bike with adult supervision to their schools. Now in Redondo Beach, we did our traffic study, and we determined that 30% of our peak hour traffic at the AM and PM peaks, 30% of it was a school run. So like in 1970, the overwhelming majority of kids walked or biked to school, and now we've completely reversed it. And so what we're trying to do is, if we could just make 30% of the car traffic, of our peak car traffic, evaporate by helping kids do something that is fun and it's social and it gives them exercise, then it's a win-win for the environment and everyone. And that's another thing. This is a social change in that everyone talks about how we have to stop selling ICE cars, internal combustion cars. We have to stop burning things. We have to stop putting a fleet of vehicles. So because a car purchased today is likely to be on the road 15, 16 years later. And that means that a car purchased today is still going to be in use in 2000. And okay, I was a math major, but that doesn't mean I was good at arithmetic. So if it's 23 now, then it'll be in use probably in 2049. Did I do my math right? And we're supposed to have net zero in 2050. So, but think not in terms of cars, but in terms of people. A kid that is 6 years old today and learning to ride a bike, they will probably live to 86, 90. In this area, we're relatively well off. That kid would need transportation for another 80 years. And so the habits that the children are building today are even more important than the vehicles that we're putting on the road today. And so I always prefer to invest in people instead of things. So this is why I get so excited about a bike bus and safe routes to school. And so this is transportation too. Like my neighbor across the street had 2 children with wheelchairs because they had a genetic condition. And so she waited years and years for the state to purchase a van for a wheelchair lift equipped van for her children. And imagine if we had a world where she didn't need a car, and her, her kid could get around in an electric wheelchair. And this one is actually interesting because in an electric assist, this is an arm bike. She's actually powering it with a little battery. And so cars should serve people. People shouldn't serve cars. And right now our built environment is wrong. It's backwards. And we have a geometric problem in that in an urban environment, you just can't keep stacking the cars because we would just be choking in exhaust and choking in traffic. So cars should be used sparingly in the city by the people and the trips that truly need them. And we should try to facilitate the shorter trips without, so that they can be done with the smallest mobility unit that can get the job done. And people say, oh, well, what if you're older, if you're disabled, and what if you have children? Well, the top left, that's my friend Kate Peng. She's another math major, and she's also another data cruncher. And she married a guy that she met who moved back to his native Netherlands for a job, and she accompanied him. She rides an electric tricycle. She takes her children by electric tricycle to school. Then she either bikes home or she bikes to the train station based on whether she's working at home or working in the city in her office that day. Bottom left is another bike bus in the town of Limerick in Ireland. Top right is Olivia de Havilland when she was in her 20s on the set on the, I think she, the Paramount soundstage. And then on the bottom is Olivia de Havilland. She's almost 100 years old when she's riding her bicycle. She rode her tricycle around as transportation to the end of her life. And so we can have mobility for life and we can have fun. Maybe she lived to be 102 because she rode her bicycle. Anyway, my professional interest in transportation is because of climate change. Transportation is the tail that wags the dog. It's the main greenhouse gas emission source in both California and LA. Our transportation emissions are, I think this is for California. For LA, it's 44%. And then if you add the fugitive emissions from the pipelines, and then you also add the refineries, LA County's greenhouse gas emissions is half motor vehicle use, half. And so we're not going to do anything about climate change until we decarbonize transportation. And it doesn't mean that we sit at home alone in the dark. It means that we get to the places without a car. And this was a report that just came out this month. The US greenhouse gas emissions are, again, our highest emission source. In fact, it's been climbing slightly because even though we're driving electric cars, we're selling so many more SUVs that it's just swamping out everything that we've saved from switching to electric cars. What we really need to do is to get out of cars as much as possible for our short trips. And we can meet our climate goals if we lower our VMT by 30% and electrify the rest. And so this is what I'm going to be talking about a little bit more. But we're not on the right trajectory. The California Legislative Analyst's Office just came out with a report, and it was scathing. They looked at what California's stated climate goals are, and then they looked at the progress that we've made, and they said, okay, you've done all the low-hanging fruit. We've stopped using coal almost, except for LADWP. The renewable energy sector is going gangbusters, but we have not made any progress on transportation, and that's still our biggest slice of the pie. And we have not, and our elected officials are not doing anything substantive that is actually going to help us get to that goal. You just can't keep throwing subsidies at electric cars with long waiting lists. We're not going to be able to substitute a gasoline car with an electric car and reach our climate goals. Not only are there not enough battery materials and supply chain issues, but that's not enough of a CO2 savings. So read the scathing report. And then they're just not space efficient for the cities. Like, look at Hawthorne Boulevard. If adding another lane, look at the 405, if adding another lane could actually help us with this mess, then why did we add another lane to the 405 only to make traffic slower on the 405? If you add another lane, you induce more driving, and you also make it less pleasant for the people that are trying not to drive. You squeeze them out of the road, and it's loud, it's noisy. I mean, it's loud, it's polluted, it's hot. Like in cities, whenever there's a holiday and there's less driving, the cities get cooler by almost a full degree, because internal combustion engine, that combustion is hot. It's hot gas. So anyway, private automobiles are the worst way. If you were to design a transportation system, they're the absolute worst, the least space efficient way to get around. You know, maybe if you lived in Montana, we could all drive everywhere. But in LA, we can't. There's just a geometric problem. And if we had, like, if enough people took buses and the buses were frequent enough, you can squeeze a few more people. But if you had but in a 10, this is how many people you could move through a 10-foot traffic lane in 1 hour. And so bicycles are really space efficient. And I know that not everyone can ride a bicycle, but if we can get like the able-bodied people on bicycles, it would help the remaining people that are in the cars or the buses move faster. Dedicated bus lanes are another great way. I do take the bus. I drive over to the Gardena, the Harbor Gateway Park and Ride, and I take the Silver Line, now called the J Line. I take it downtown whenever I want to do something downtown. And it's great because it has a dedicated bus lane, and I can just sit there and read a book, look out the window at all the poor people stuck in traffic. I love that. But heavy rail, like heavy rail, like the red line or the purple line downtown, they move the most people of all. But that's very expensive, and we don't have very many of the rail lines. But we can do dedicated bus lanes. We can do protected bikeways that where if it's not protected, I'm not going to bike it after dark or when someone is driving home with the sun in their eyes. Because we know that when during the days of the year when people are commuting with the sun in their eyes, they're much deadlier for pedestrians and bicyclists. So those are hours of the season that as a bicyclist, I am very aware of when the sun is low on the horizon, because I know that I don't want to be on the street. Too many people are dying at that point. But that's why we have to have protected bike lanes, protected with concrete, not with paint. Because with paint and someone who's like futzing with their, I was already hit once by an SUV driver that was looking at his console instead of the road. And because his SUV hood was so high, he barely saw, like he only saw like my helmet or something. His kid screamed at him because his kid could see my helmet. But anyway, it has to be a protected bikeway. And then like bicycles, especially e-bikes, are very resource efficient. A Tesla Y needs about 150 times the battery as the Turn GSD, which is the minivan of e-bikes. This minivan this the turn bike can carry 200 kilograms of passenger plus car, of passengers, cargo, and bicyclists. That's about 440 pounds. That's a big payload it's a 34 kilogram bike and it can carry 200 kilograms. That's 5 times, you add the accessories and stuff like that, but its payload is 5 times the vehicle weight. Whereas you take a Tesla Y, which is the most popular electric car in my neighborhood, and it is 2,054 kilograms empty, but it can only carry 433 kilograms. And that's passengers and no more than 93 kilograms of cargo. That means that you're carrying 5 times as much car plus battery as actual payload for a Tesla Y. And then the turn is exactly opposite it. I used to work in satellite meteorology, and you always want to have like the most functionality. You want to carry the most payload. And I was just shocked at how inefficient the Tesla Y is. In fact, recently there was an EU study that came out that said that that electric SUVs, long-range electric SUVs like the Tesla Y, if we adopt too many of them, if we create them and adopt them, and they suck out the whole battery supply for other uses, like the stationary backup batteries for a building or the e-bike batteries, you're actually going to create more carbon emissions by pursuing an electric vehicle only path like we are right now in this country. You're actually going to create more carbon emissions than if you pursued electric bicycles as much as possible, and then you had electric cars for only the people that couldn't ride the bicycles. So we really have to have a multi-pronged strategy to make it safe and attractive to do all of it. And it's very cost effective. My neighbor had to wait years and years for her minivan, lift-equipped minivan, because it cost so much. She had a Sienna and it was like $80,000. The Van Ram, that is a electric assist bicycle that can carry a wheelchair, and they make two, one where the person sits without their wheelchair, and one where the wheelchair and the person rolls in, the passenger rolls into the platform and locks in their wheelchair, and they're at their destination. This is basically a wheelchair taxi, and it costs less than $10,000. So League of Women Voters stands for efficient use of government resources. And so we could, for less money and serve more people, purchase these electric assist Van Ram vehicles so that every family with a child or a member in a wheelchair could have one of these. And then we could also have a fleet of shared minivans with lift-equipped minivans so that people could reserve it a few days a month, but it would be shared between many families. And then no one would have to wait years and years and years for the mobility that their child needs. But this is really efficient, and it's clean, and a mom who's a caregiver for special needs child doesn't get very many opportunities to have fun or get exercise. And these Van Ram wheelchair bicycles are great. They make the whole family happier. You should go to their website and watch the video. And then speaking of resource efficient and government efficient use of government resources, like AAA, every year they publish their cost to own a vehicle estimate, and it made big news because it's more than $10,000 per vehicle now. And many families own more than one vehicle. In fact, the modal family in the South Bay owns 2 cars, and we have more families that own 3 cars than 1 car. So we're spending enormous amounts of our private family funds on vehicles. And then economists said, there's more. For every for every 44 cents that a consumer spends, the public is spending 56 cents. Like, and almost 50% of it is in the government in terms of roads, provisioning roads, and taking care of air pollution and water pollution and stuff like that. That, like, cars are the top source of air pollution in LA County, and most people know that, but they do not know that they're the top source of water pollution here as well, because the tire particles end up in the waterways, and the brake dust has copper. The tire particles have microplastics, and they have zinc, and so they're the top microplastic pollution source. They're the top heavy metal pollution source. They're the top PM 2.5 and PM 10 source. They're the top NOx and SOx. So, and government spends a lot of money cleaning up the pollution from cars, but that's only put out by the people who are the car users, right? And so we've basically privatized the mobility, but we socialize the costs that mobility incurs. So that's why, if you're interested in efficient government, government should try to get as many people, so it should incentivize people to get out of cars as much as possible. It's much better for their pocketbook. Wear and tear on a street surface is actually proportional to the fourth power. So it with the weight of the vehicle. So do you want to do a 4,000 pound Tesla, or do you want to do 4,000 pound Tesla or a 75 pound e-bike? It is a lot cheaper to take care of the wear and tear of an e-bike rider. And then there's safety. This is the Active Transportation Program heat map for Torrance. These are the reported traffic collisions, the crashes in the city of Torrance. And you can see your Hawthorne Boulevard is a high injury corridor right here. And that big bullseye in the middle is the intersection of Hawthorne and Torrance Boulevard. This is how many, and the color intensity is based on the whole statewide average. So so the city of Torrance is slightly above average, but in poor parts of the state where people can't afford cars, they walk and bike more. They have a higher bike and walk mode share. And so it's not surprising that they also have a higher crash rate. But for a wealthy city, Torrance is really an outlier in terms of how many crashes you have. And I think it's because you have so many wide and fast streets. And your population is wealthier and can afford bigger and larger cars, and which becomes like a real problem because larger cars are just more damaging, and the new cars have such blunt front ends. The driver can't see what's in front of them. I know you've seen that famous news story where 13 kids could sit in front of a Cadillac Escalade, and the mother that's sitting in the Escalade could not see them. It wasn't until they got to the 14th kid that she could see the top of the head of the next kid. And so this is a statistic for Torrance. Again, this is for the last 10 years, 2011 through 2020. This is broken down by age and gender. And you see that children are disproportionately victims of traffic violence, as are the elderly too. And it's also a feminist thing because women live longer than men, and so they're less likely to drive in their older years. So that means that they stay home alone, which isn't optimal, or they're out on the streets trying to walk to the destinations that they need, and they're being hit quite a lot. And this is another issue with Torrance. If you look at the census statistics for Torrance, Torrance is an older city. You have a large bump of people in the 50, 55. Then you have several times more 80-year-olds than a typical city. And then these are the survival curves for being hit by a sedan. This is actually an underestimate because it's for being hit by an average size sedan, not for an SUV, which is SUVs are the motor vehicle here. So our streets are a little deadlier than this graph. But if you're 70 years old and what is the speed limit on Crenshaw? Is it 40 or 45? And you get hit by someone that is going the speed limit, you're almost guaranteed not to survive that crash. So that's why there is a movement to 20 is plenty, because at 20 miles per hour, the crash is survivable for most people. And I've given this talk to League Beach Cities, and which is also another very old population. And people said, I don't want to ride a bicycle, Grace. You grew up riding a bicycle, but I didn't. I want to take transit. Why don't the buses run where I need them to go? And Sharon told me I have to explain this because housing is a politically toxic. Everyone in the South Bay, everyone talks especially political candidates, they talk about overdevelopment. And if you were looking for housing, you wouldn't think it was overdeveloped. You would think it was underdeveloped because we don't have very many housing choices out there, especially if you don't have millions and millions of dollars. But if you want transit, then you want frequent transit. You want reliable transit. And if you have transit that runs at more like 4 times an hour or more at the peak commute hours between, like, say 3 and 6 p.m. And it also ran at 30-minute frequency through midday and in the evenings, then that area becomes a high quality transit area. And you'll see that in Torrance. This is the HQTA predicted for the year 2045. And you see that Gardena, all of Lawndale is a HQTA, right? And in Torrance, you only have a little bit over here by Western, and then you have here where the future Green Line station is going to be. But you don't have any more HQTAs. And it's because of this process called RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment. If the more area of your city is HQTA, the more of a housing assignment, the higher the housing allocation that would be given to your city. And so when you tell your elected officials or your candidates, I don't want any more housing, then they follow your orders and they eliminate HQTAs from their city so that they will get lower RHNA allocations, and so they won't have to build housing. So if you want transit, then you need to accept housing, because we have the evidence is loud and clear, and the state officials have agreed with the people, the transportation and climate scientists who've been studying this, that the way that we're going to hit our climate goals is we're going to have to get out of cars, and we're going to use transit, and we're going to use micromobility, like whether it's e-bikes or a motorized scooter or whatever. But and nothing is going to change unless you allow more housing. You're not going to get more transit. And HQTAs only count public transit. That would be, and that means it's public. It's open to the public. Anyone can use it. It's not a school bus. It's not an employer provided van pool or shuttle. It's not limited to only seniors or disabled like the Via vans. So it means trains or buses running a fixed route with a schedule. And seniors are well served by trains and light rail, because you see these purple things. These are the where you can sit there with a wheelchair or your mobility scooter, and you can see that there are multiple places within a train that you can go. So a bunch of friends that have been friends for 80 years and are all in wheelchairs, and they want to go someplace together, they can get on a train and know that they can all get on the same train, and they can go to a museum, catch a show, go dine out together. They can do all that together, but only by a train. Because if you did it by bus, yes, it's wheelchair lift equipped, but they only have room for one, possibly two wheelchairs, depending on the size of the wheelchairs and how crowded the bus is. And that means that if you're waiting for a bus, if you're waiting for a bus and there's already someone in a wheelchair in it, then you might not be able to get on. Or if you're traveling with another friend in a wheelchair, you're both not going to go on, and you're not going to have your day out with your girlfriends. And so buses, for people that are in wheelchairs, living near a train line is really optimal. Living near a train station is really optimal. And we want as many people as possible to live near a train line. And that means building taller so that you can take an elevator, visit your friends, and then you can all take the elevator down to the train, get on a train, and go anywhere you want. I mean, that is like true mobility freedom, right? And if the bus didn't have room for you, that's called a bus pass up. And then that means that you're going to be sitting out there on the street with all that loud traffic and pollution for another 30 to 60 minutes waiting for the next bus, which might not have room for you either. Anyway, we have shared shuttles like the Via and Metro Micro. These are very expensive for government to operate, and they don't serve that many people. And they also don't run on a fixed schedule. And I've seen my neighbor across the street, an elderly woman, wait out for 20, 30 minutes for the Via to show up, because those things run late a lot. And like, so over here, I'm showing 190, like even if you could get to a bus stop, you face things like this, like on Hawthorne Boulevard, where you have the Torrance 8 bus and you've got the Metro 344 bus, each running on 30-minute headways. If you want to go north-south on Hawthorne, you might say, oh, okay, I'll just go to the bus stop right here. And the bus stops are here on the bottom, on both the right and left side. Do you see the yellow bus stop? But we have a three-way intersection here to facilitate cars making a right turn. We've just eliminated that fourth crosswalk, that fourth crossing. This is called a three-legged intersection. And that means if you're over here, do you see my mouse? If you're over here and you want to cross Hawthorne to get over here, you have to go all the way around you have to cross that street 3 times. You have to go 435 feet just to cross the street. And you have to wait for 3 green lights. So it could take you 6 minutes. It could take you 6 minutes to cross that street. And if you're a fast walker, you are going to be exposed sitting in this crosswalk for cars that are turning or running a red light, possibly. You are exposed to traffic and possibly getting run over for 2 full minutes if you're a fast walker. And if you're a senior walker, average pace for a senior walker is about just under 3 feet a second, and a fast walker is 3.5 feet per second. A senior could be exposed out here for 2.5 minutes. And they don't need to be. If we had just put in that 4th intersection if we had put in that fourth crosswalk, they would only have to do one crossing instead of three and have 1/3 the exposure. And here's another thing about the bus stop. If your bus is over here at the top and it's coming here and you're standing at this corner, if there were a fourth crossing, you would cross with whichever way the light would be going, and you would go one way or this way, and then you would do the second crossing when the light were green. But because you're missing this, you have to wait until the light is green in this direction. Then you have to wait again for light green for this direction. And that extra 2, 3, 4 minutes for your crossing could make you miss a bus that only comes every 30 or 60 minutes. And so this is a way that we disrespect the time and the safety of transit users and walkers. And if you're a bicyclist, this is supposedly a bike route, but there's like nowhere on here. There's no bike lane, and I see bicyclists on here, and I have biked this intersection too, and I do it on the sidewalk, which is fairly wide. But if you're a bicyclist and you're biking in a crosswalk, you do not have the right of way. So if somebody hits you, if a car hits you, a bicyclist in a crosswalk, then the bicyclist is considered at fault because they didn't have the right of way there. And so there are a whole host of issues with these three-legged intersections that not only does it put people at risk, but it also puts the bicyclists in legal jeopardy. And then there are water hazards. You know, on rainy days, certain areas are low-lying areas have a lot of standing water. And as someone who walks and bikes in the rain, I get splashed a lot by passing motorists. But here's something that here's something that matters even if you are a driver. Because like the area around Torrance Memorial has so many parking lots between Del Amo Mall and Torrance Memorial. We have so many parking lots, and Torrance has very fine silty soil, so it takes a long time for the water to percolate. It puddles a lot, and it percolates very, very slowly. We have the entrance to the hospital in a 100-year, a 1%, a 1% of the top 1% of rainfall intensity. They call it the 100-year flood risk, but it's not. It's like the top 1% of rainfall intensity. If we were to have that, the entrance to Torrance Memorial would be underwater, under as much as 6 feet of water. So that means that you can't get to the hospital. The ambulances can't get to the hospital because we've taken a low-lying area, we've paved it over, and we've made it worse. And we've made it worse in such a way that it's so bad that even the cars can't make it through when it rains. And our disaster plan, I asked my city fire chief, and he wrote the LA County disaster plan. He said that this is a known issue, and if an atmospheric river is headed, if we're in the bullseye of an atmospheric river, they already have plans at Torrance Memorial to stand up a field hospital in a tent in a higher area, because they know that the hospital is not reachable when an atmospheric river reaches us.
Grace, can I interrupt? Because you're covering a lot of stuff here, and I'm wondering, before you run out of time, you mentioned incentivizing getting people out of cars. And I'm wondering if you could give us some of your ideas about how to incentivize getting people out of their cars in Torrance.
So this is my elementary school, pedestrian shortcuts. You know, in Torrance, you don't have very many pedestrian shortcuts. Like over by Tower Elementary, you really need, you only have one that's open certain hours. But in Foster City, do you see over here, we have cul-de-sacs in Foster City, but the back of the cul-de-sac always has a park for the kids to get to the school. And they're not on a busy street. They're going through the park and they're going through a cul-de-sac and going right into the gate of the school. See that? So pedestrian cut-throughs, they shorten the time, they shorten the pathways for children to get to school, and they separate us from car traffic. Protected intersections. You could shorten the crossings. You could shorten the crossings by having little bump outs and pillows for people. There's elevated pillows for people so that they don't have to scooch over all at once and be exposed for the full 2.5 minutes. So these are the changes I would do right now. There was a law passed last year and that went into effect this year that your city can reduce speed limits by 5 miles per hour anywhere in your city without having to do a full traffic study. They could do it today. You know, you can write your city council and tell them, I want to lower the speed limit on this and that street. And they could do a 5 mile per hour reduction right now. They could just pass the resolution and do that right now without having to do a full traffic study. And with a full traffic study, they could reduce it even further if they want to. No three-way intersections, create pedestrian shortcuts as much as possible, protected intersections. Oh, a pedestrian leading interval. That means that the walk light blinks and is green before the car light goes green, so that you have a head start on crossing the street. And that way you're out of the blind spot of the cars. And so that has led to fewer traffic collisions. And pedestrian scrambles are where you have a green signal, an all-way green signal for pedestrians. And you can see that in downtown Manhattan Beach in the last 3 intersections before you get down to the pier. So that pedestrians are in the interval at one time, going in whichever direction that they want. And then the cars are in the intersection, but the cars and the pedestrians are never in the intersection at the same time. So you're never walking with a turning car breathing down your neck. And I want to just give you some hope. This is a bike boulevard in Germany, and it's a wide street that they've remade. You notice there's a bioswale in the middle so that they can percolate water. This is in northern Germany where it rains a lot, and there are cars on the street, but they have to go very slowly. And so this is basically a people bike boulevard. And you see that they have housing, they have dense housing along a bike boulevard. So people in wheelchairs, bicycles, walkers, they have full mobility. And you see underneath here, they have the parking garages in the basement, and they can drive, but out the back. So here is another parkway. Here's another parkway where you've got like a river or a creek going along here, and all this is permeable. And you have housing. This is multifamily housing, but you don't need a yard when you just look out your balcony and you're looking at this big green park and you're seeing people and trees. This is in Europe, you see a lot of density around a plaza. Like these density around a parkway, this is a common thing that you would see in Asia, and you're seeing it in Europe now too. And density around a plaza, you see this a lot in Europe. Density around a park, you know, we claim that we value parks, right? So if we have to build housing to accommodate younger people and working age people and children, why not build the housing right around a park so that the people they don't have to drive to a school, or they don't have to drive to a park because they're already there. And remember, building housing means building a neighborhood for neighbors. It's not about building another parking lot for cars. And I think that part of the antipathy that we have for housing is we think that housing has to bring cars. And so we've already decoupled water use from people, right? We've decoupled water use from people. Like we have cut our water use as a region by like what 20-25% while doubling the number of people over the past few decades. So we can do the same thing. We can build for more people, but we have to not build to invite more cars. And safe streets are a feminist issue. I can give a whole nother talk about that. And the whole point of mobility is to get places. And you can move things closer in time by one, moving faster, but you don't want people to be moving faster in a car because that's deadlier. But what is, oh, that's a typo. Cycling is faster than walking. And then electro-micro mobility and combining transit with bicycles and electric wheelchairs and scooters, that sort of stuff. Bike lanes are multimodal. And this is what I'm talking about, signal timing. If we had a pedestrian scramble, we wouldn't have a wheelchair. This is two people in a wheelchair going out to a restaurant in San Francisco and see this car just crashed into them trying to make a left turn. And and Think 3D. This is a Dutch city that decided to build a bridge just so that the kids from one side of the river can get to this middle school on the other side of the river and not be on the same bridge as cars.
Dr. Peng, just want to mention it's 8 o'clock.
Okay, that's it. I'm done.
We did have a few questions in the chat. And I didn't know if Mr. Obejes wanted to unmute himself so he could ask those questions if he still had them. And also, if anyone else would like to raise their hand, we are looking to answer any other questions.
Okay, so I am unmuted. My first question was about protected bikeways. You were making a strong case that you have to have separated bikeways, you have to put in concrete. I'm going to counter argue that just like with some of the other things you said, there's room for a mix of solutions. I personally find sharrows to be very useful. It's in the safest places I ride are where there are sharrows. And that could be something like things we're familiar with here, like on Hermosa Avenue in Hermosa, or on Coast Highway, when you're down when I go ride down the Laguna de Gil and I'm coming back on Coast Highway, when I enter Corona del Mar, there's sharrows down, and I feel pretty safe there riding in that sharrow, because that sharrow basically says, hey cars, you should expect bikes here. So I just wanted to know why can't we use sharrows as well?
There's quite a bit. There's been quite a bit of study about sharrows, and it turns out you're much more likely to be hit by a car and die on a street with sharrows than without.
Well, I thought the study said it's basically sharrows alone aren't enough. You have to couple sharrows with traffic calming.
Right, and we don't do the traffic calming. And would you let your 8-year-old, or would you let your 80-year-old, would you let your 8-year-old ride on Pacific Coast Highway with a sharrow?
On the sections that I've driven that sharrows already exist, you're talking about Corona del Mar. Yes, I would, because and those sharrows are there.
Where is Corona del Mar exactly?
It's between Newport Beach and Laguna Beach.
I'm talking about here in Torrance.
Okay, but you're giving me there is no place on Coast Highway here that has those sharrows. That's correct.
Exactly. Right.
But
there's
my point
supposed
would
to be
be
a bikeway. There's supposed to be a bikeway on Pacific Coast Highway, but Redondo Beach has repaved and has not put in any bike facilities on PCH. And also,
but I think we're getting away from the point of the question. The point of the question is, do sharrows have value or not?
Sharrows. Do you remember the German thing that I showed you, the German Bikes Boulevard that I showed you? That has a speed limit of 20 kilometers per hour. So a sharrow where the cars are in Germany much smaller and going much slower, then yeah, sharrows would be fine. But right now, Pacific Coast Highway with 40 miles per hour and
I only brought up
5,000-pound SUVs
Pacific Coast
is not-
Highway where it does not have 40-mile-an-hour
Right.
traffic. So the point was, again, it's Sharrows, like Hermosa
Right.
Avenue.
So if we reduced our speed limits, to that, we could try Sharrows, but I know that it is not going to be safe for young people and for the very young and for the old. You know, we want to design our streets for 8 to 80, and Sharrows are just not sufficiently supportive for little kids. Okay, next question, Bob.
Yeah, thank you. I know you didn't have time to talk about this, but I think the most important transit decision for the South Bay community is happening this month when the EIR on the Green Line extension down to Torrance is they're having public meetings and are open to public comment. And my concern is that Metro is only hearing from the people whose residences are immediately adjacent to the right-of-way, who have a particular parochial point of view. And the larger regional perspectives about things that you mentioned in terms of connectivity and easy transfers and ability to allow the entire region to have access to the stations that will be built, depending upon where the line is located. So what I would encourage a larger community of people who are interested in transit to be engaged and to take a very close look at the EIR and the options that are available and try and figure out what is best for the region to maximize investment and to do all the kinds of goals that you said about people wanting to get destinations, so that when this billions that are being invested in this light rail line, we want to make sure that it's located in a way that will maximize public participation and utility. And I could go into my concerns, but I don't want to take up time.
Right.
But
I know the city of Torrance has said that they want it along the existing right-of-way, but the city of Redondo Beach and Lawndale want it along Hawthorne Boulevard. And I think the subtext of the cities, they're all trying to minimize the HQTA within their city limits.
No, but I think the larger concern, routing it along Hawthorne Boulevard, there won't be any stations along Hawthorne Boulevard if it's routed that way, except to the single station across street of the Galleria. And there's a very serious safety concern. It would require people to cross Hawthorne Boulevard in the middle of the street to with only a signalized intersection to access the light rail line. And Redondo Beach is spending tens of millions of dollars in a transit station over by the Target on Kingsdale next to the right-of-way that will be a considerable distance from the other location of the station, which would mean that people in Torrance, for example, who are taking a bus along Artesia Boulevard or something like that, would have a considerable distance in order to access the line. There's very legitimate transit concerns from a larger regional perspective that I would hope people who live in other places besides the immediate right-of-way would take a look at it and raise their voices during a time in which maybe we can have an impact.
Right. I know selfishly, it's easier for me to ride a bicycle to I rode my bike to the bus station, the new bus station, to check it out on Sunday. And that it would be so easy if the train went along the train track, because basically I would just walk across the train track and be right there at the bus station.
And if I could just raise one other concern that would to put on your plate, you mentioned your love of the great use of the Silver Line, the J line. I totally agree. It's a very cost-effective, efficient transit use, and I think somebody should, in the medium term, take a look at using the San Diego Freeway for very similar bus express lanes. There are no plans to do that in the next 30 or 40 years.
I know, and I would love to.
And something like that would only happen if people like you and would raise their voices and say, hey, let's take a look at some of these other options as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Brian?
So I put it in the chat. real fast, you're brilliant. You're so well read. You're a compelling speaker. I want a syllabus from you. Number two, I think you said switching to EVs increases
No, no,
greenhouse gas
no,
emissions.
no.
Oh, help us.
It's a
then third
complex
was the
argument.
cost.
It's a complex argument that they're making, which is that if the global battery supply is what's limiting electric car production right now and electric bicycle production. So with a constrained battery supply, because the supply chain and the raw materials, with a constrained battery supply, the fastest decarbonization is with electric bicycles. If we use the limited battery supply that we have right now, and we put it all in electric vehicles, it would actually under that scenario, you would release more CO2 than if you put it all into electric bicycles. You wouldn't release more CO2 than over ICE cars. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
I think that I don't see any other questions, although
Oh, he also
was one in the
asked,
chat.
right, number 3, can you repeat what you said about how much it costs to own a car? And that's a AAA, how much it costs on average to own a car in America. And that was like $10,000 a year. And that's counting like the interest and the depreciation, maintenance and gas and insurance. That was $10,000 a year. And then for the public, businesses have to pay for parking lots. It costs them real money to provision parking lots for you. So if you walk up, you cost them nothing. You get off a bus and you walk in, they don't have to provide anything. And if you bicycle in, they have to provide a bicycle rack, which costs quite a bit less, because you could have a bike rack with 10 bikes for this place where you would, with a stall for just one car. In the chat, were there any more questions? Oh, could I make a plug and share my screen one more time and talk about League LA County? League LA County has, oops. Let me stop my screen share and see what's happening with my. So League LA County has a thing called the Water and Infrastructure Group. It's called WIG. And every month we meet by Zoom. Second Thursday of every month, we meet on Zoom to discuss some aspect of infrastructure pertinent to LA County. And so next Thursday, we're going to be talking about the Livable Communities Initiative, about how to remake the city, how to remake our city streets so that they're more economically productive, they're cooler, less polluted, and just much more pleasant and happier and safer places to be. So register for the Zoom link. I hope to see you there next week. We're going to hear from Lindsay Sturman, who is the co-founder of the Livable Communities Initiative, and Eduardo Mendoza is both a credentialed urban planner, and he is also a demographer, and he'll be talking about making streets safer for all ages. That's really important. And our past meetings are always, not always, but most of the time, our past meetings are recorded and you can watch the videos. The last month we heard from Kathy Berlin about the 10 actions and 10 processes for local climate action, greenhouse gas reductions. And remember the flood map that I showed you? That was a big blockbuster paper by Professor Brett Sanders at UC Irvine and his group. They were on the cover of Nature and they were on the front page of the LA Times, and we got them speaking to WIG. We got him speaking to WIG, and you can see his presentation there. And this is Brandon Goshi, planning for climate uncertainty and water. He's from Metropolitan, and he's talking about integrated resource planning to make sure that we have water for the next 30 or 40 years for a region. How do they do that? They use climate models, and they also use their own planning about the state of their facilities. So anyway, and then we have just tons of really great, useful information. We get great speakers every month. I hope to see you there. And especially to learn more about Livable Communities Initiative, Lindsay and Eduardo know so much more than me. So I hope to see you there.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Peng. If everyone wants to do a round of applause, you can at home, muted, or a writer in the chat to say thank you for all those that informative discussion and information. And I'm going to share also a plug for our own upcoming events. So this is our website for the League of Women Voters of the Torrance area. And right now, this event was right here, Imagining a Better Transportation Future, but we also have an event later this month I mentioned earlier, which is grappling with racism, bias, and discrimination in the South Bay. And our speaker is going to be Sydney Morrison. He is a retired principal who was a principal at several of our high schools and a fantastic speaker. I'm looking forward to hearing him talk about his own experiences, as well as some things that we could be doing. This is likely to be the beginning of a series of different events on racism, bias, and discrimination in the South Bay and how we can grapple with it. And again, I did put the feedback survey in the chat, so we'd love to hear from you, and certainly love to hear anybody who would like to join the membership at any of their local. You can join any of the leagues that you'd like to. You don't have to join only the one for your own city, but let's say you like what the Beach Cities is doing, or our Torrance area is doing, or Palos Verdes, or even Pasadena. You can join anyone that you want. And it's a good time to join, as we always have great work to do. And with that, I'd like to see and thank you all for joining tonight. This has been a wonderful, informative speaker. Thank you, Dr. Peng, for your informative, that was some great material you had in your presentation. I will be making this recording available for those who'd like to see more about it later. That's okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Oh, you're on mute, Dr. Peng.
Thank you for having me. I didn't even get to show my backup slides. I have that's only half my slides.
I understand that problem. I have the same one myself. I tend to want to share too much and makes it
Next
hard
time.
to get through it all. But I'm
Next
sure
time
there'll
we'll
be
have
more
you back.
opportunities.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
All right. Bye.